I still remember the first time she looked at me, not the polite glance she gave others, but the kind that lingered a second too long. Long enough to make me forget what I was supposed to say. Her name was Elena Ward. Mid-40s. Calm, deliberate, the kind of woman who didn't rush her sentences. She taught literature like she was confessing something. Each word fell from her lips with purpose, as though language was something sacred. And me? I was just another student trying too hard to listen, and failing. That afternoon, the classroom was emptying out, sunlight slanting through the blinds in thin, golden strips. She was erasing the board, her sleeve rolled up, a faint smear of chalk on her wrist. The smell of coffee hung faintly in the air, mixed with the quiet sound of the brush against slate. I should have left. But instead I asked her about something I didn't need help with, a line from a poem. Something about memory and mercy. She turned, resting the eraser on the desk. You already understand it, she said softly. Maybe not the way you do, I replied before I could stop myself. That earned me the smallest smile, not indulgent, not mocking. Just real. The kind of smile that made my chest tighten. She sat on the edge of the desk, close enough for me to notice the faint scent of her perfume, warm, subtle, like cedar and rain. It's about remembering who you used to be, she said, and how mercy can come from that. Her voice was low, steady, but her eyes gave away something else, a flicker, as if she just said more than she meant to. I nodded, trying to look at the floor, then back at her. Do you ever wish you could go back? Elena hesitated. The clock ticked once, twice. Sometimes, she said finally. But then, some people remind you that you don't have to. I didn't realize how close we were until she shifted slightly, her knee brushing against my leg. It was nothing, really, a moment that could have meant everything or nothing at all. But it made the air feel heavier, slower. Her gaze dropped, then returned to mine, steady, searching, almost like she wanted to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. Careful, she said, almost to herself. You notice too much. I laughed quietly. I thought that was the point of literature. She shook her head, a corner of her mouth curling. Not everything should be studied. We stayed there, her sitting, me standing, caught between the safety of conversation and the danger of what neither of us said aloud. I noticed her hand resting on the desk, her fingers tracing the wood absent-mindedly. When I reached for my notebook, our hands brushed. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full. Like the pause in a song you don't want to end. I remember her eyes, clear, thoughtful, carrying something like regret, or maybe recognition. It felt as though she was remembering a version of herself she hadn't spoken to in years. Then, a sudden knock on the door. She blinked, straightened slightly, and her voice shifted back to something practiced. Come in. The janitor poked his head through. Sorry, Ms. Ward, need to lock up soon. She nodded quickly, her tone polite again. Of course. We're done here. I gathered my things, pretending not to notice the slight tremor in her hand as she capped her pen. When I reached the doorway, she said quietly, You make me remember who I was before. I turned back. But the moment was already gone, replaced by her teacher's smile, the kind that hides more than it shows. Still, it stayed with me, that look, that half-finished sentence hanging in the air, long after the door clicked shut behind me. After that day, something changed, not loudly, not in a way anyone else would notice. It was the quiet sort of change that hides in eye contact and half-smiles. I started staying after class more often. Sometimes I had a real question, sometimes I didn't. She must have known. She always waited a few minutes before reminding me the halls would close soon. Elena Ward had a way of speaking that made every word feel chosen. But lately she spoke less, as if she was afraid of what might slip out. I noticed the way her fingers played with her necklace when she searched for the right words, or how she'd stop mid-sentence and smile at nothing, as though she'd just caught herself. One evening, rain tapped gently against the tall windows of her classroom. The rest of the building was empty, and the sound of water against glass filled the silence between us. She was reading a stack of essays, glasses low on her nose, a pen tapping absently against the page. "You ever get tired of being the one who knows everything?" I asked, sitting across from her. She looked up, one brow lifting. "You think that's what I am? I think you act like you have to be." Her smile faded into something softer, smaller. "Old habits. You learn to keep yourself together long enough, it becomes muscle memory." She leaned back, eyes on the rain. "I used to think I'd have a life full of things I loved. A marriage, travel, children maybe. But somehow, I blinked and found myself here, a room, a desk, and too much quiet." The honesty in her tone made my chest tighten. She wasn't trying to sound wise. She just sounded tired. "You still have time," I said quietly. She gave me a look that almost hurt to hold. "You say that like it's simple." Her voice broke slightly at the end. Then, almost reflexively, she reached for my wrist, a brief, instinctive touch, as if to stop the air between us from shifting too far. Her fingers lingered longer than they should have. Warm, hesitant. I didn't move. She seemed to realize it, withdrawing her hand slowly, her composure returning in pieces. "You shouldn't stay so late," she said. "I don't mind. That's not the point." "Then what is?" Her breath caught, just once. "People talk," she murmured. "And they never talk kindly." I could hear the faint tremor in her voice, the one she tried to hide. I wanted to tell her it didn't matter, that I didn't care what anyone thought. But I didn't. I just nodded. She stood, walking toward the window, arms folded loosely. The rain outside blurred the reflection, her outline soft, almost ghost-like in the glass. "You remind me of someone I used to be brave for," she said, voice distant. "Maybe she's still there," I whispered. She turned, her eyes meeting mine across the dim room. No lecture. No smile. Just that long, unguarded look that made every sound disappear. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but close enough to feel her breath brush faintly against my cheek when she exhaled. She didn't step back. Her hand twitched slightly, as if wanting to reach out, but she stopped herself. "Go," she said softly. I didn't argue. But as I left, I caught her reflection again, standing still, fingers resting on the windowpane, lips parted like she was about to say something she never would. That was the night I realized this wasn't just admiration anymore. It was gravity, and neither of us was pretending not to feel it. It happened on a Thursday, the kind of gray afternoon that makes the air feel heavy. The campus was half empty for midterms, the corridors quieter than usual. Elena had asked me to stay back to review a project draft. She said it casually, but her tone carried that same faint tremor, the one that always meant she'd already decided, even if she pretended otherwise. When I arrived, her classroom lights were low, one flickering faintly in the corner. A mug of tea steamed on her desk, its scent familiar now, bergamot and something faintly floral. She looked up when I entered, smiling just enough to undo me. "You're early," she said. "I didn't want to make you wait." Her eyes held mine for a beat longer than necessary before she gestured toward the desk beside her. "Sit." I did. Close enough to see the faint shadow beneath her eyes, the streak of silver at her temple she never bothered to hide. We started with the project, or at least tried to. She leaned over my shoulder to read, her hand resting lightly on the back of my chair. Her sleeve brushed my arm, soft, unintentional, but it made every word I'd written blur on the page. "Your writing's changed," she said quietly. "It's more careful now. Like you're afraid to be seen." "Maybe I am." "Why?" I turned slightly, and for the first time, she didn't move away. Our faces were close, close enough that I could see the faint smudge of ink on her thumb, the small tremor in her breathing. She was about to say something when a voice called from the hall. "Miss Ward?" We froze. Her hand was still on my chair. She stepped back so fast the pen rolled off her desk. "Yes?" she called, her voice steady, too steady. The door opened a crack, another teacher, cheerful, unaware. Sorry, Elena, I thought I saw the lights on. Didn't mean to interrupt. It's fine, she replied smoothly, already gathering papers she didn't need to touch. Just helping a student. I kept my head down, pretending to adjust my notes. The door closed again. Silence returned. Except now it wasn't the same. Her hand was still trembling slightly as she picked up her pen. That's why, she murmured. Why this can happen. I looked at her, the flicker of panic fading into something softer, resignation maybe. You think I don't know that? Elena, don't, she said. But her voice didn't have the strength it should have. The rain began again outside, slow, steady. She closed her eyes briefly, as if the sound hurt. I stood, the space between us shrinking again until I could feel the warmth of her through the air. You said I make you remember who you were before, I whispered. What if that's not a bad thing? Her eyes opened, wide and searching. For a moment she looked younger, undone by her own silence. She didn't move away this time. Her breath brushed my chin, her hand hovering just shy of my chest. Then the clock on the wall chimed, sharp, sudden. She stepped back, a whisper escaping her lips like a secret breaking. Please don't make this harder. But even as she said it, her eyes stayed on mine, soft, conflicted, unable to hide what her voice tried to bury. We stood there, two people trying to step away, yet drawn closer than ever, held together by everything we couldn't say out loud. And when I finally left, my hand brushed hers by accident. She didn't flinch. She only whispered, You notice too much. The same words as before, only this time, it sounded like surrender. It had been weeks since that afternoon, but the air between us hadn't cleared. If anything, it had thickened, full of things unsaid, glances caught too late, and the quiet ache of restraint. Elena had started keeping her door open during office hours. Small, deliberate gestures, boundaries disguised as habits. But the moment everyone left, she'd close it again without thinking. I noticed that too. That evening, the last of winter's light was fading, gold turning to gray through the tall windows. She was at her desk, grading papers, her glasses slipping down slightly. I'd stopped by to drop off my revisions, but she barely looked up. You shouldn't keep coming here, she said. Then why do you always let me in? Her pen paused mid-line. The clock ticked behind us. I don't know anymore, she said softly. Something in her voice broke open, not loud, but enough. I stepped closer, my paper forgotten in my hand. Elena. She looked up at me, eyes tired but fierce. Do you have any idea what this looks like? Yes, I said. And I don't care. You should. Why? Because people would misunderstand? Or because you already have? Her breath hitched, sharp, unguarded. You're too young to play with words like that. I'm not playing. Silence. Then, a sound escaped her, almost a laugh, but not quite. She stood, pushing her chair back, the tension between us so close it felt physical. I'm your teacher, she said. This is wrong. I shook my head. No. What's wrong is pretending it doesn't matter. Her eyes glistened then, a flash of anger, or maybe pain. You don't understand. You go home, you sleep, you wake up and it's gone. I have to live with it. She turned, but I caught her wrist, gently, not to stop her, just to make her listen. Her pulse fluttered under my thumb. Elena, look at me. She did. Slowly. The space between us was a breath, her perfume, warm skin, the faint tremble in her hand. I reached up without thinking, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know what you're doing to me. Then tell me to stop. She exhaled, long, unsteady, and leaned just slightly into my touch. I can't, she said. The room felt smaller. The world outside, irrelevant. She stepped closer, until I could feel the warmth of her chest against mine, her heart beat fast, uneven. My hand moved to the small of her back, hesitant, waiting for her to draw the line that never came. I keep telling myself it's nothing, she murmured. That it'll fade if I ignore it long enough. Has it? Her eyes met mine, wide, vulnerable, surrender flickering there like a secret caught in light. No, she breathed. The word hung between us, trembling. I leaned in, close enough that her breath met mine, that our lips hovered just apart, when the sharp buzz of her phone shattered the silence. She flinched, stepping back. The moment collapsed, fragile as glass. On the screen, a message, dinner tonight? Been a while. Mark. Her ex-husband. I'd heard the name before. Elena stared at it, shoulders tense, eyes unreadable. When she finally looked back at me, her voice was barely a whisper, steady but broken at the edges. This can't keep happening. But her hand was still on mine. Neither of us moved. The next morning, she wasn't in class. The substitute said she was out for personal reasons, and the word personal hung in my chest like a weight. The hours dragged, and when the final bell rang, I found myself walking toward her office without even deciding to. The door was closed. The light inside was dim. Through the glass, I could see her silhouette, shoulders hunched, head in her hands. I knocked softly. No answer. When I pushed the door open, she looked up fast, eyes red, caught between anger and something that looked like fear. You shouldn't be here, she said. I just wanted to make sure you were. Don't. Her voice cracked, more fragile than sharp. Don't make it sound like you're rescuing me. I froze. What happened? She turned away, gathering papers that didn't need gathering. Someone saw us. The words hit harder than I expected. Saw us? Yesterday. After class. The janitor. Her breath came shallow. He told the administration he thought something was inappropriate. The room went silent except for the sound of the radiator clicking. Elena, it's fine, she said quickly, but her voice trembled. I told them you were helping me with a project. That it was nothing. Her hands shook as she spoke, and the papers slipped from her grip, scattering across the floor. I knelt to help, but when our hands brushed, she jerked back like the contact burned. Don't, she whispered again, softer this time. If anyone sees... Her shoulders slumped. The strong, composed woman I'd always known looked small, human, like the weight of every choice had finally caught up. I set the papers on the desk. You lied for me. For us, she said quietly. Then, after a beat, and I don't know why. Her voice broke again, lower now, quieter, the kind of honesty that cost something. I told myself I was protecting my job. But when I said your name in that office, my throat closed. I realized I wasn't afraid of losing this position. I was afraid of losing you. The words hung there, raw and trembling. I stepped closer, unsure if I should, but unable not to. She didn't move away this time. Her breathing hitched, shallow and quick, like she'd been running. Elena, I said softly, you don't have to keep pretending this isn't real. She laughed, small, disbelieving. You make it sound like I have a choice. You do. Her gaze found mine sharp, desperate, like she was searching for an escape that didn't exist. No, she said. Not anymore. For a moment neither of us moved. I could feel her trembling slightly, her arms brushing mine as she turned toward the window. Everything's changed now, she whispered. They're watching. I can't even breathe without wondering who's looking. Then stop pretending to breathe, I said. Just be here. For 1 second. Her back rose and fell slowly, the weight of the world in her silence. Then she turned, suddenly, decisively, and pressed her forehead against my chest. No words. Just the warmth of her, the quiet, unsteady rhythm of her breathing, and the sound of her voice breaking softly against me. I don't know how to stop this. My hands hovered at her sides, torn between restraint and everything else. She didn't ask me to let go. And that was the moment I knew, no matter what came next, we were already past the point of turning back. It was late, too late for anyone to still be on campus. The halls were empty, the world outside washed in the orange hum of streetlights. I found her in the library, the only lamp glowing on her table, pages of essays untouched. She didn't look up when I approached. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low, tired, the same words she always used when she wanted me to stay. "They suspended you, didn't they?" A pause. Then, barely audible. "They're reviewing the complaint." I sat across from her, the silence between us louder than any accusation. Her hands were folded, white-knuckled. The air smelled of old paper and rain, clean, sharp, electric. "Elena," I said softly, "you don't have to go through this alone." She laughed, quiet, bitter. "You keep saying that like you understand what alone means." "I do now." That made her look up. Her eyes, tired, glassy, held mine with something fragile. "You shouldn't," she whispered. "You should be out there, living something that isn't me." "I don't want out there," I said. "Not if it means pretending this didn't matter." Her breath caught. For a second, either of us moved. Then she stood, walked to the window, her arms wrapping around herself as if to hold something in. "You think this is a story that ends well?" she said. "A teacher, a student, both old enough to know better, and still—" She stopped, her voice breaking mid-sentence. I stood behind her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her back, but not touching. "Then maybe it doesn't end," I murmured. "Maybe it just changes what we are." She turned, slowly, carefully, until we were face to face. "You don't know what you're asking for," she whispered. "Then show me what I'm risking." The air thickened. She reached up, her fingers trembling as they brushed the side of my face. It wasn't a bold touch, it was hesitant, reverent. Like she was memorizing something she knew she'd have to let go of. Her thumb traced my jaw, slow and uncertain. "You're too young to carry me," she said. "And I'm too old to be saved." "You don't need saving." "Then what do I need?" "Someone who sees you." Her eyes closed, one tear slipping free, catching the light between us. "You already do," she breathed. And then we were inches apart, the space between us electric, fragile. Every breath collided. Every heartbeat felt shared. I leaned in, but she stopped me with a hand against my chest, not to push me away, just to hold me there. "Don't make me forget the rules," she whispered. "Maybe they were never yours to follow." Her hand dropped, and for a moment she leaned into me, her forehead resting against mine. No kiss. No words. Just the quiet surrender of two people who had already said everything through silence. Then she stepped back. And in that distance, that single step, came the truth either of us had been brave enough to say: we couldn't stay here. Not like this. But in her eyes I saw the clarity that had been missing for months. Not peace, exactly, but understanding. "You made me remember," she said softly. "And now I have to decide who I'll be after." I nodded. "So do I." We stood there for one last breath, one last glance that felt like forever condensed into a heartbeat, before she turned off the lamp, and the world went dark. Weeks passed. The noise around us faded, rumors dulled, whispers lost their edge. She wasn't suspended, just reassigned to a different program across town. It was meant to create distance, but in truth, it only made the space between us feel more deliberate. We stopped seeing each other for a while. Not out of choice, out of necessity. But even then, she lingered in everything. The way I paused before speaking. The books I reached for. The quiet I'd never noticed before knowing her. Then, one evening, I saw her again. It was late spring, the first warm night of the year. The city felt alive again, the air sweet with jasmine and the faint hum of traffic. I was walking home from the station when I saw her sitting outside a small cafe, alone, reading. No makeup, no pretense, just Elena, hair loose, face lit by the amber street light. She looked up and smiled before either of us spoke. "Still noticing too much?" she asked, her voice soft, familiar. "Always." We sat there for hours, no boundaries left to defend, no titles between us. Just two people who had already lived through the silence that once separated them. She told me she'd left her old apartment, started painting again. I forgot how it felt to make something for no reason, she said. I think that's the best reason, I replied. There were pauses, as always, but this time, they weren't heavy. They breathed. They felt like something healing. When the night thinned out and the streetlights dimmed, she leaned back in her chair and looked at me for a long moment. You were never just a student to me, she said. I know, I whispered. And you were never just my teacher. She reached across the table, slowly, deliberately, and took my hand. Her fingers were cool at first, then warm as they laced through mine. No hesitation this time. Her thumb brushed against my skin, tracing small circles. Do you regret it? She asked quietly. Not once, I said. Even when it hurt. Her eyes softened. Good, she murmured. Because I think that's how I found my way back to myself. We sat like that, the world shrinking to the sound of her breath and the faint music spilling from the cafe door. No rush. No fear. Just the calm that comes after the storm, the kind that doesn't ask for promises, only presence. When we stood to leave, she stepped closer, resting a hand on my chest. You made me remember who I was before, she said again, the same words as that first day, but now they sounded different. Whole. I smiled. And who are you now? Her answer came as she leaned in, her forehead resting gently against mine. Someone who stopped pretending she didn't feel. No kiss. No dramatics. Just that, her breath, her warmth, her truth pressed against mine. It was enough. When she finally pulled back, her hand lingered in mine as we walked down the quiet street, side by side, our steps in rhythm. For the first time, there was no weight between us, only the quiet certainty that, somehow, we had both found what we were looking for.